This film begins by showing the Nivu, an illegal shark fishing vessel sailing 8 miles off the South African coast after successfully catching a shark. Two crew members, Rennery and Kwame, quickly hoist the shark onto the ship, planning to harvest its fins. Proud of their catch that day, the two crew members are seen taking selfies together until they hear a warning from the ship's radio urging everyone to leave the area immediately as they prepare to depart. Their ship is suddenly struck by something. Upon investigation, the two crew members spot sharks around their vessel. Renner and Kwame are thrilled at the prospect of catching another shark that day. Unfortunately, their excitement quickly turns to dread when they realize a group of bull sharks is circling their ship. Oddly, the sharks are swimming toward the vessel in AV formation. Renner and Kwame, witnessing this strange behavior for the first time, begin to panic, especially as the sharks start attacking their boat. The violent shaking of the ship caused by the shark's attack eventually throws Kwame into the water, where he falls victim to the ferocious sharks. Not long after, Reender also falls overboard and meets the same fate due to the bull shark attacks. A short while later, Trent Slater, who had previously warned the crew of the Nivu, arrives in the area using a motorboat and inspects the now empty vessel. At that moment, the group of bull sharks still in V formation is seen swimming toward his boat. No, on this. Trent quickly presses a remote he carries, causing the sharks to cease their attack. Instead, the sharks obediently follow Trent's boat as if they were his pets. The scene then shifts to Dr. Misty Calhoun, a shark conservationist who is giving a lecture about the high number of sharks killed solely for their fins. Misty expresses her disappointment with various parties who seem indifferent to the declining population of sharks worldwide during the Canada session. A student asks which shark is the most dangerous in the ocean. Misty explains that the bull shark is the most dangerous due to its bite being 10 times stronger than that of a great white shark. Returning to Trent, the man is shown directing the sharks to the Achilleos complex, a research facility for bull sharks. All the sharks following Trent's boat had previously escaped, but fortunately he was able to locate them all and return them to captivity. Meanwhile, after Misty's class ends, Craig Burns, the right-hand man of a pharmaceutical billionaire named Carl Durant, approaches Misty, intending to consult her about Carl's new project related to sharks. During the conversation, Craig invites Misty to join the research, offering that Carl would fund her shark conservation organization for the next 5 years in return at the Achilleos complex. Trent appears angry with his colleague Aaron Elroy, who is responsible for keeping the sharks from escaping the facility. Aaron explains that the enclosure's perimeter showed no signs of damage that would allow the sharks to escape. Trent examines every monitor until he discovers an excavation at the seabed, which is likely how the sharks managed to get out. Trent and Aaron wonder how the sharks could have figured out how to dig an escape tunnel, switching to Misty, who eventually accepts Craig's offer. She goes with him to the dock, where she meets Lizzie Kim, a neurobiology student, and her husband Daniel Sim, a clinical neurophysiology student, who will also be joining Carl's research. The three of them are then invited to visit the Achilleos complex, which is the center for shark research. At the same time, Trent is busy diving underwater to install additional others to go up to the facility, as everyone wonders what he is about to do. Carl suddenly pushes Aaron into the water, even though he cannot swim without hesitation. Misty immediately jumps into the water to save him. At the same time, the group of sharks being studied at the facility begins to move toward Aaron and Misty just before the sharks attack them. Trent quickly presses the button on his remote control, causing the sharks to swim away from Misty and Aaron, who then climb back onto the platform. Although she has seen that Carl's team can control the bull sharks to prevent them from attacking, Misty still feels that his research is not a good idea. After everyone returns to the research lab, Aaron tells Trent that while he was underwater, one of the sharks briefly grabbed his leg. This is evidenced by the bite marks on his shoe, leaving Trent puzzled by the strange behavior of the sharks, which had previously been easy to control. Meanwhile, Misty is in the wet lab observing the sharks in the research facility. Carl, still in his room, injects a small vial of strange liquid into his body. A few moments later, Craig enters Carl's room to report that the sharks they have been studying had escaped and killed some fishermen instead of panicking. Carl is pleased by this news, as he believes the sharks have become smarter after receiving the drug injections he created during the conversation. Carl also reveals his plan to exterminate all the sharks used in the research. Once the study is completed at the same time, One of the sharks swims near the window of Carl's room as if eavesdropping on their conversation in the kitchen. Lizzie, who is with Daniel, expresses doubts about joining Carl's research, considering the high risks involved. Daniel tries to reassure his wife, emphasizing the high pay that Carl offers at that moment. Daniel finally admits that he has actually been part of Carl's research team for the past 7 months. Hearing this, Leslie is upset with her husband for taking the job solely for the money without considering the risks. However, after Daniel continues to persuade her, Leslie decides to join the research team with her husband later. Everyone gathers in the wet lab where Carl explains the concept of nootropics, a drug that can enhance intelligence, and is being tested on all the sharks at the facility. Upon hearing Carl's explanation, Misty becomes even more frustrated with the billionaire for testing the drug on bull sharks, which could potentially make the sharks even more aggressive and cunning in attacking their prey during that time. Carl then asked Misty to examine a female bull shark named Bella that has suddenly started behaving strangely to begin the examination. Trent, assisted by several colleagues, sedates Bella in the enclosure and then transports her to the wet lab for further inspection. At that moment, Carl informs Misty about his goal in the research, which is to save humanity using the drug he has discovered, while everyone is busy examining Bella. One of the sharks bites the motorboat's anchor, which the research team usually uses for transportation. Returning to Misty after hearing his explanations, she believes that Carl is overly obsessed with the research. This belief is reinforced by testimony from a team member named Josh, who frequently saw Carl injecting his drug into his own body. In her conversation with Josh, Misty also learns additional information that Carl's drug enables the sharks to communicate with each other in the midst of the conversation. Carl approaches Misty to find out why Bella has been acting strangely. Lately, from her observations, the behavior isn't due to Carl's drug, but because Bella is pregnant. Hearing this, Carl and the others are quite shocked, as they have been regularly conducting blood tests on all the sharks being studied at the Achilleos complex. Shortly after, an emergency alarm sounds because a shark has pushed the motorboat into the electrical control box and fuel tank, causing an explosion in the wet lab. Carl orders Josh to take a saliva sample from Bella, forcing Josh to reach into the shark's mouth. During the process, Bella suddenly wakes up from sedation and almost bites Josh's arm, but he quickly pulls his arm out of the female shark's mouth before she escapes from the wet lab. At the same time, a larger explosion occurs, causing a partial power outage at the Achilleos complex. Due to the explosion, the research team quickly checks the monitors to see what happened, only to be shocked as they witness a shark destroying the surveillance cameras in the enclosure, as if the sharks are planning something. Switching to Craig, who is in his office writing a report, he steps out to find his colleagues due to the tremors and power outage. As he walks down the corridor leading to the lab, the walls, which are adjacent to the shark enclosure, begin to crack and leak due to the shark's attacks in the wet lab. Misty notices that the corridor outside the lab has flooded when she peers through the glass door. Misty and the others are shocked to see Craig's lifeless body floating, having been killed by a shark attack. Misty and everyone in the lab are puzzled about which shark could have attacked him, since all the sharks were supposedly in the enclosure. After thinking for a moment, Misty realizes that Bella may have given birth to the shark pups, which could have entered the facility through narrow gaps. At that moment, Trent also informs the group that all exits leading to the upper levels of the facility are now submerged, leaving the only escape route through the pool without consulting anyone. A team member named Mike Shuo dives into the pool and exits the Ilos complex to seek help. Unexpectedly, a shark from the enclosure rams into Mike, rendering him unconscious. Knowing this, Trent quickly dives in to rescue his colleague as Mike regains consciousness and reaches for his diving gear in the pool. One of the sharks leaps out of the water and bites his head. Mike's death escalates the tension, leading the remaining survivors to blame each other. The argument is abruptly halted when Trent informs them that the room is losing pressure, which could cause it to explode. Due to the ensuing explosion, they are all thrown apart, and seated by the rush of water flooding into the wet lab. Misty ends up in a water-filled corridor with Trent, while Josh is swept away with Aaron. Meanwhile, Daniel is seen swimming alone in another corridor, desperately searching for Lizzie, who is unconscious elsewhere. Carl, now separated and alone, quietly injects himself with another dose of his experimental drug. A short while later, he encounters Misty and Trent. Carl then informs them that they can escape the facility through an air duct located in the filtration room. At the same time, Daniel continues to search for Lizzie, until he is suddenly confronted by a group of sharp pups. Quickly, Daniel jumps and clings to a pipe, waiting for the shark pups to leave. On the other hand, Josh and Aaron are also thrown into panic when they see a swarm of sharp pups about to attack them. Aaron manages to climb to a higher spot, but Josh decides to hide in a bathroom with a glass door on. Unfortunately, the shark pups easily break through the door, causing Josh to meet his end, as the sharks prey, switching to Misty and the others who were nearly at the filtration room. Misty hears Daniel shouting for Lizzie. Despite Trent and Carl already entering the room, Misty decides to search for Daniel in that moment. Carl deliberately closes the door and damages it to prevent Misty from entering the room. Realizing this, Trent becomes angry with Carl and informs Misty about the door. For calmly, Misty asks Trent to go up to the facility and get help. Meanwhile, Aaron, fearing an attack from the group of sharp pups, uses a bed as an emergency raft. At the same time, Lizzie, who was unconscious, finally wakes up and begins walking down a corridor. Daniel, seeing her through a door, tries to stop Lizzie, but unfortunately the door won't open, leaving Daniel frustrated just as Lizzie realizes his warning. The shark pups reach the corridor where Lizzie is in attack, killing her. On the other hand, Misty finds a welding torch and uses it to cut through the door that Carl previously damaged. Carl and Trent have already reached the top of the facility, where Trent immediately calls for help using his satellite phone inside. Aaron is startled by a group of shark pups trying to attack him, but he manages to evade them and eventually meets up with Daniel, who is grieving after losing Lizzie. The two continue together until they reach the door that Misty is trying to open. Once the door is opened, Misty instructs Daniel and Aaron to climb up first, while she prepares to face the approaching shark pups using the welding torch. Misty successfully finds off the shark pups above Trent, and Carl help Aaron climb up, only to be shocked when they see that half of Daniel's body has been devoured by the shark pups. Reluctantly, they drop his body back into the water. Meanwhile, Misty decides to escape through the pool, which forces her to dive into the containment area. Misty is eventually saved after Trent and the others help her out, allowing her to avoid the pursuing shark. At that moment, Misty expresses her anger toward Carl for selfishly abandoning her and blames him for the horrific tragedy that has unfolded. In the midst of their argument, a Coast Guard drone arrives, bringing a sense of relief to everyone. Unfortunately, the drone, which is flying low over the water, is suddenly devoured by one of the sharks. This diminishes Misty and the others' chances of survival even further, especially as the Achilleos complex is about to sink in a few minutes. Because of this, Trent urges everyone to swim towards a motorboat in the middle of the sea. Aaron, terrified, refuses the idea until Carl throws Aaron into the water, followed by Trent, Misty, and Carl during their swim towards the motorboat. Misty and the others realize that Aaron hasn't surfaced yet, and at that same moment Bello appears between Misty and Carl, who are still underwater. Carl tries to scare Bella by shouting underwater. The tactic seems to work, making Carl boast about his idea, but Bella suddenly reappears from below and bites Carl, killing him instantly. Misty and Trent quickly climb onto the motorboat, which proves difficult to start. Another shark attack occurs, prompting Misty and Trent to fire a flare into the shark's mouth. Success, killing it as Misty scans the ocean for any further shark attacks. She is startled when Aaron emerges from the water. It turns out that Aaron survived after sinking without being attacked by any sharks after helping Aaron onto the motorboat. Misty tells Trent that they can't let the experimental sharks escape into the open sea, as it would endanger many people. Trent then takes a key he had previously taken from Carl and uses it to open a box that activates the facility's self-destruct mechanism with the explos. Trent hopes that all the sharks in the containment area are killed in the final scene. Set 3 weeks later, people are shown enjoying swimming and surfing around a beach, unaware that Bella and her pups survived the explosion at the Achilleos complex and are now swimming freely in the open sea. Moral lesson from the story: if you're messing with experimental shark drugs, always double-check that your escape route doesn't involve an underwater dance-off with hungry fish.